everyone. Thank you for joining Synerzip's webinar. This is Jill Hurston. I'm the Marketing Director at Synerzip. I apologize for starting a couple minutes late. We were, of course, having a few technical difficulties, which are now worked out. I just want to do a really quick sound check. If anybody could just chat in your chat box that you can hear me just fine, I'd greatly appreciate it. Awesome. Thank you. Thanks, Pankaj. So we're going to go ahead and start. I just want to remind you that this is being recorded. So if you have to leave for any reason, I'll send you a link to the direct recording tomorrow. So I'm going to turn it over to Sabu Sankara. He is our VP of Software Engineering, and he will be moderating today's webinar. Sabu, go ahead.
Thanks, Jill. Welcome, everyone. Today's topic will be how to be an unofficial Agile Transformation Catalyst from Damon Poole. He'll be the presenter. I'm honored to introduce Damon to all of you. Damon deeply understands how to create an environment of technology and market innovation that leads to business success. Damon has been doing Agile training and coaching for a little over 10 years and has worked in situations as diverse as a couple of teams at the up-to-date division of Wolters Kluwer to more than 800 different teams at Capital One. Prior to that, he founded AccuRev, an award-winning software configuration management company that was acquired by Borland. Damon's current venture is Nexxle, a to-do and work management system that is free for users and with premium features for businesses. He also continues to take part-time Agile coaching gigs in the greater Boston area. So with that, over to you, Damon.
All right, well, thank you very much for that introduction, and thank you everybody for coming. I think this is going to be fun and interesting. So, okay, thank you for that introduction. And just a quick mention of Nexxle here. So it's early on in its development. The business features are still on the way. So basically, it's free for using it for anything at this point. And the idea is it's free for users, and then businesses will pay for the business-oriented features. It's good for personal to-dos, work projects. It has shared lists. You can use it for teams. You can share individual items, lists, whatever, and it works on all platforms, all major browsers. And you can just basically sign in and check it out, see what you think. All right. So we're going to talk today about how to be an unofficial catalyst in an Agile transformation. So, the idea is that you want to go Agile, or you want to become more Agile. And typically what you run into when you want to do something new is you get that phrase, well, that's how things work around here. So if you're running into that on something, whether you're already Agile or there's some piece of Agile that you want to do now, like for instance, maybe you're doing iterations, sprints, whatever. You're doing stand-ups and retrospectives, but you're not doing continuous integration, or you're not doing continuous delivery, or you're doing Scrum, but you want to move to Kanban, whatever it is, if there's not an official mandate, that can make your life a little harder. But part of what I discovered in working in all those different environments was that it almost doesn't matter if you have a corporate mandate. You still need to get the mandate of the individuals that are involved, right? Because if people don't want to go, they're really good at resisting. So basically, everything that I'm going to talk to you about today are techniques that I have used in various organizations when I have run into resistance, which is pretty much inevitable. All right. So the other thing that you might run into is, well, while that is the way things run around here today, I see your point, and that makes sense, but we're too busy to make changes right now. So let me ask you this. When as a business have you thought, well, hey, things are going really smoothly right now. We got a lot of free time. We can make a change, and it doesn't matter if there's some downside risk or whatever. Hey, let's go ahead and make a change right now. Right? That's probably not where things start. So the too busy to make changes right now, generally, you're also going to hear. And while there's almost no time to make a change ideally, we need to move, work through that anyway. So when I started out Agile coaching, one of the things that I found out, and this is something that's true in a lot of different venues or places, situations, but it's really, really important when you're trying to do something in the Agile space to bring about a change, to understand first. Right? So maybe you came from a different organization, you came into a new organization, and they don't do continuous delivery, or they don't do Agile, or they do Scrum, they've never heard about Kanban, and you say, let's do whatever the thing is that you want to do. So, let's say Kanban is the thing. Hey, we should do Kanban. And people say, oh, yeah, hey, that's really interesting. And they just keep going about their day. First, it's really important to get into the minds of the people that you're working with, figure out what they see as the problems, discover what they see as the challenges and the solutions. Because you know what? Whether you have a mandate or not, whether you're an official Agile catalyst or not, you still have to win hearts and minds. So the best thing that I've found, the people in general are most excited to do things that they already want to do. And one of the things that you can do as a catalyst is, because you're passionate about it, go and talk to a diverse number of people and find out what are the things that they already want to do. And we'll talk more about that in a bit. But first, you want to understand. Just get a lay of the land kind of thing. And that's
Damon?
true. Yes?
Just wanted to remind our audience that we will make this webinar keyboard interactive webinar. Means the participants or audience should be can type in the questions in the questions box, and I'll bring it up from time to time at appropriate pause points.
Excellent. So maybe we'll hear some of the challenges that people are running into today. That's great.
Please continue, Damon.
Sure, no problem. Okay, so next up, start small. So if you can find some small thing that people want to do that you believe will help. So if you want to go towards Kanban and people are like, oh, Kanban, that's for maintenance teams, or I don't know, I hear that's for manufacturing. And you see that they don't have a card wall, or maybe they're using a tool and they don't have the card wall there or whatever. And you think, hey, maybe if I just show them the card wall, that would be a step towards Kanban. So, get the card wall enabled and people go, wow, that's a lot easier to visualize our work. And, ooh, it's pretty clear now that we're not going to make our sprint goal, right? So people start to get excited and they think, wow, this person is really into this. And not only that, they're not trying to force things on me. They're showing me things that are pretty exciting and help. Okay. Well, that was exciting. Anyway, so you want to find things to start small. The other thing that you can do to show that you're really into this and that this is going to help are find things that you can do without getting anybody else on board, and that people can see that it makes a change. So one of the things I want to introduce is the idea of personal Kanban, which comes from Jim Benson of the Modus Institute. And there's a whole book on that you can read. The basic idea is you want others to see your change in behavior and those results. And personal Kanban can not only help to illustrate that, but can actually help you become more effective, right? So it's a good thing for you. And as you become more effective, if you're taking on extra work in your spare time, right, copious spare time, to make changes, it can help you organize those efforts. So if you find some things that you can do to help, maybe there's 5 things, but you realize, hey, I've still got my own work. I'm going to focus on this one thing, right? So personal Kanban can help you to keep organized and be the change that you want to see. So our people are watching this. They come ask questions. They say, what are you doing? They may even volunteer and say, hey, how can I help? All right, so that's a fantastic way to start small and to be the change you want to see. And hopefully people will want to emulate some of that or learn more. One of the things that very early on when you're interacting with people, if you start saying, let's say you're working with folks that have never done Scrum, or they've heard about it but they don't know the terminology, or you start talking about WIP, and people think, oh, well, that sounds like a lot of discipline. There's a WIP in there. You say, no. WIP is a term from Kanban that means blah, 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 right? Okay, that's great. So now you're starting to talk jargon. Eyes are crossing. So if instead you can explain things without jargon. So here's an example talking about Agile. It's kind of conflating it with Scrum, but that's okay. So instead of talking about sprints and iterations and all that, just say, hey, what I'm talking about doing is trying to focus on what is the highest value. Because that time we were working on that project and we threw in all this stuff and we got all this stuff kind of 80% done. What if we had done 80% of the stuff 100% of the way, right? We had just focused on what's the highest value, do that first. So then you've got a team, so us together, right, we're a good team. What could we do if we were doing nothing else that would have high value? We could get it done in 2 weeks, show it to somebody, get feedback, and then review our results. Review it with the customers, talk amongst ourselves, think about what could we do better. Now, this isn't talking about, jargon, it's not talking about Scrum, it's not talking about Kanban, it's not talking about Agile. It's just talking about things that perhaps people will be interested in because you're speaking in a language that they understand, right? You're not adding any extra words. And if they say, wait a minute, I think you're trying to fool me into doing Scrum, say, hey, I'm not trying to fool you. If we want to do Scrum, that's fine. I'm just talking about what's valuable to me. So try to avoid the jargon. And many people are actually at this point, they may be burned out on hearing about Scrum over and over again. Right, so something to think about. So I'm going to share with you a specific technique now that you can use, whether you're already doing Scrum or already doing some form of Agile. One of the things that people run into a lot is either the lack of user stories, right? So maybe they have a document that's, 3 pages long, and the first thing is I want so that. Okay, that's fantastic. So that it's got that, the user story header, but it's maybe really the same requirements. So sometimes, right, so engineering maybe is doing Agile or Scrum, but the rest of the organization is still writing requirements documents. They say, well, that's fantastic, but we still have to, talk to upper management. We got to talk to, customers, and we need a requirements document. So you may run into a product manager who's been tasked as being the product owner, but hasn't really made that leap yet. And so the team is responsible for coming up with the work. And sometimes people will complain and they'll say, oh, we don't have good user stories. Well, you're going to be doing something during, let's say, the 2 weeks. You're going to be doing something during those 2 weeks anyway. So why not say, well, okay, we don't have good user stories. We don't have good requirements. We're going to do something over the next 2 weeks. Let us as a team decide what it is we're going to do over those 2 weeks and describe that work in terms of user stories. And I got to tell you, if you're working on a team and you can't, you're not giving good user stories, and you yourselves can't come up with good user stories, you're in trouble. You're in trouble. So why not put that effort in and figure out, hey, do we know what we're being at? Not are we capable, not do we know what we're doing, but do we know what we've been asked to do, right? And you might say, well, it doesn't really matter because whatever we come up with, the product manager has to agree. But if they're not giving you good user stories, you've already got a problem. So write the user stories yourself. Say, this describes what we've decided to do after talking to product management, looking at the requirements. Then, at the end, you yourself check and say, hey, did we do that? And if product management or product owner or whoever comes in and says, that's not really what I asked, you can say, well, I get that. It wasn't really clear what you asked. Let's see what you gave us. Now let's see the user stories we wrote. I think you'd have to agree that we did what these user stories said. So give us better user stories, and we want to help you. This isn't a confrontational thing, right? So you can have now you have something to structure that conversation. So how does this help you when you want to go Agile, but you don't have an official mandate? If you really, so here's the kicker, and I got this idea from Uncle Bob Martin of Clean Code fame. and this was about refactoring. So he had a whole group of people, Agile, conference, 1,600 people. And he was talking about how they won't let you refactor, they won't let you do TDD. And everybody was like, yeah, the organizations won't let us. Us Agilists, we know it's valuable. And he said, here's the kicker. If you think it's valuable, if you think it's going to save you time, if you think it's going to make you work better, there is no they. It's you. Just do it. So find ways that you can use what you believe is powerful and agile to do it anyway, right? So just because you're given requirements doesn't mean you have to wait for user stories. You can do it. You don't have to wait for, an official stand-up meeting. If you've got some folks that you're working with and you say, hey, why don't we just get together on a regular basis, don't call it a stand-up, and they agree, great. Who's going to mind that? So, that's one of the ideas of doing it unofficially. As long as you're producing value, who's going to complain? So the other thing you can do about user stories, and I've sort of talked about this a little bit or hinted at it, is you can influence others with user stories. So here's an example of how you can influence and start to win hearts and minds. So you've got a product or a product person. I don't know what we're going to call them, product owner, product manager, doesn't matter. Anyway, they come from the product side and they say, oh, the application should respond faster. And so taking into account what you've learned about user stories, and I'm not saying that I'm giving you a lesson on user stories here, but you can go out and find out about acceptance criteria, or if you believe in acceptance criteria, use that idea. So they say it should respond faster, and you say, well, how fast are we talking? And they say 1 second. So you say, all right, well, I'm going to take this request that you put in, and I'm going to say, we will know that it's fast enough when it responds within 1 second. We call it an acceptance criteria. Here's what the value is. And so you may start to influence that person to be thinking, oh, instead of using these vague terms, let me figure out how to describe what's acceptable. Another way to look at this is if you have user acceptance testing, and people maybe don't tell you what's going to happen until they actually, it depends on how your user acceptance testing is structured, but very often that's, a bunch of BAs, if you have BAs, getting together and saying, all right, let's see what it's going to do. But they haven't necessarily written down that in advance. So the stuff that they end up doing, whatever people do to test at the end, those are actually, another way to think about it is acceptance criteria, and you can ask people for those up front. Another example. So, and these all come from real world situations. So for instance, in this one, I had a person come to me once. They were very frustrated, and they said, the product owner keeps expanding the scope, right? And, this isn't just about, implementing Agile for the first time, this idea. This is, how do I work to influence better Agile? How do I set a good example? So a person came to me and they said, the product owner keeps, adding new work, expanding the scope. What can I do? And I said, well, what you showed them, did it match the user story? And they said, yeah. And I said, oh, well, instead of making it a you versus them thing, make it a us thing, you and them. So take the thing that they're asking for that's new, write it as a user story and say, hey, this sprint, I've still got these 3 stories to do, and you've basically just asked for this new story. And yes, okay, I have the IDE open and I'm in there coding and all that, and maybe it's going to save me a little time to do it now, but that's like a 4-hour story, and that's going to save me 5 minutes. So you can't really put 4 hours into 5 minutes, so that's not helpful. So I've got these 3 stories. Which of them is this new thing that you've asked for less important than? You tell me what you want to do, because I can do, just to make it simple, I can do 4 stories. You've asked for a 5th. Which 4 do you want? If it includes that 5th one, it's, and you're going to drop another one, great. Otherwise, I'm sorry. You're basically asking me to, work over the weekend or something like that. Is that really what you want me to do? So not to be confrontational, but just to structure it so that the person you're interacting with understands what they're asking you to do, right? And that can help to influence better Agile. So these are examples. but hopefully they're starting to, get you thinking about what else can I do. And a third example here with how you can influence with user stories. So a QA person says a new feature isn't working right, but actually what is the right behavior isn't clear. So maybe it says, something like the user should have a convenient way to select a photo. So the QA person is thinking a carousel is great, and the developer was thinking a grid of photos was great, and they don't agree. So in that case, if it's not clear, then go and find the product person, and if you can't, and ask, hey, which of these are you thinking? So that points out a couple of things, right? So that it could be done a couple of different ways. Maybe there was some disagreement. You talk to the product owner, you get a better sense of what kind of product you're trying to create, and he says, oh, simple grid is great. So what you get from that is he's looking for something simple right now, maybe not something, really, mind-blowing. So the next time, the developer and the QA person are looking at it, they think, oh, well, we're trying to choose between mind-blowing and simple, and the product owner said, right now we're going for simple. Great. And then the other thing is, if the product person disagrees with whatever you decide on, if they're not available when you're working on it, then that's a good opportunity to explain why in Agile it's good to have the product owner to be available. Right? So if they're not going to be available, if they can't produce somebody that's going to be there for the team, then maybe you'll designate a person, right? Just to help them understand, what are the cause and effects here within an Agile environment. Because, frankly, outside of something like Scrum or Kanban, very often that's quite nebulous, and it's very hard to make improvements when everybody's finger pointing. So, yes.
Hi. We have a couple of questions, if you can take.
Awesome.
Can a part of the company or an organization go Agile?
Oh, can just part go if it's not everybody?
Uh-huh.
Oh, absolutely. And that's a good time to point out that Agile is a broad concept. So I like to sort of break that down into what's the specific thing. So you could say, is it okay for part of the company to get together and touch base several times a week, and the rest to just go to status meetings? Yeah, that's fine. Is it okay for just some groups to get together and think about what's going well, what's not going well, and what could we do to improve? Sure, that's fine. I think where it starts to get a little tricky is if you have one team that's sort of like really agile, and they're depending on another team, and that other team says, hey, we're working on our initial framework, and that thing, we can't do it right now, blah, blah, blah. That's a little harder. So I used to tour with another person, doing Agile talks for AccuRev with another company, and he said, it's pretty funny, but not something that I particularly think I would have come up with, but he says, being Agile doesn't give you license to be a jerk, right? So just because you're Agile and somebody else isn't, doesn't mean that they have to conform to you. So if you're really passionate about Agile and you're saying to somebody else, hey, you gotta switch, because you're making me unhappy, well, you're probably going to make them unhappy. So look at ways that you can interact with them. So in the example I was giving, maybe they're working on a framework, whatever. So don't prioritize stuff that absolutely depends on them. So maybe there's some stuff that you can do early on where you wait for that framework. Mm-hmm. Or if you say, hey, that's really great, can you do this first part of the framework and just get something working? I understand you want to do the whole thing. So find ways with that other team to make both of your lives easier. And, there's no simple answer to that. But in my experience, especially in larger organizations, getting the whole organization to go Agile all at once, near impossible. So that is a problem that you're going to run into if you have, more than one team. And it is something that, people have solved. That is actually a whole different topic. I could go on and on for that, but yes, it is possible. And if you look out there, waterfall, agile hybrid, stuff like that, you'll definitely find things.
Very good. And
excuse me.
So thanks, Damon. And if you want to bring it down to within engineering, like, for example, most companies, they have client engineering versus backend engineering, some analytics that are separate. Can this be applied to engineering, to groups within engineering too, that one group could be agile, the other one could not be?
Well, now you're really getting into some fine-grained questions there. It's an excellent question. So part of the issue, like if you're talking about Scrum specifically, Scrum says there is no such thing as an engineering team. There is no such thing as a QA team. There is no such thing as a product team. There's the team, right? So so if you think about, and I'm not a sports person, so bear with me, but if you think about baseball, you don't have like the, oh, that baseball team is all pitchers. That baseball team is all, hitters. That baseball team is all catchers. You need to field a full, a real team that has all of the different disciplines in order to, if you're going to play another team to win. Right? So it's the same sort of thing. What Scrum is saying is, while it's interesting to have different teams, that's actually in the long run not going to be effective. Now that said, right, you have to get there. So some of the things that I've seen that work really well is get the individual teams, if they're split up by discipline, for instance, thinking about getting a card wall out there. So then they can see how their work is flowing, and another team that depends on them can come in and see, oh, you're blocked. Is there something that I can help you do to unblock? Yes, there are things you can do to cope on the way to being truly agile, but you always want to do it with a mindset of how can I get to individual agile teams. So maybe say, all right, I'm going to start out by producing one Scrum team, and it's going to have a person from QA and a developer, and a UI person, and a product person, right? So in that way, you're not really affecting all those other teams, but you're moving a project into the agile way, getting the organization, comfortable with that. So that's one of the things that you can do. All right. And sort of transitioning back to this from that idea is things like I'm referring to a stand-up here without calling it a stand-up. And that's one of the things you want to do, not necessarily use the jargon, but just say, hey, I think for us it would be really useful, hey, you and me, we work together a lot. Why don't we just get together, when we're coming in the morning, get a coffee and chat about what's going on. And maybe the person is remote, so Slack or HipChat or Microsoft Teams are all, very popular. There's a lot of different ways to interact very casually without a lot of, big tools or, process or whatever. So you can just start promoting that idea, and maybe other people will say, hey, how come I didn't get invited to your morning coffee? I hear it's really great. Oh, sorry. Come on in. So the next thought is, going back to the personal Kanban idea and, being the change that, that you want be the change that you want. Make it easy for others to see your user stories, right? So if you're working on a team and you're creating user stories, even though you're not officially agile or whatever, put them in some place where it's obvious. See if you can get, some older screen, maybe a smaller screen to put in a public area that, is fed by Trello or Jira or LeanKit, something like that, or use stickies, whatever. So people can see, oh, these folks are doing something different. And you don't necessarily have to wait until there's a tool decision. In many organizations, even though they, maybe they have some ports locked down or whatever, you can find ways to get Trello, Jira, LeanKit in there. Even if it's just on your phones, right? So you can't use it on your PCs, but you can use it on your phones. That's one way you can do it. And then when somebody says, hey, that's not an official thing, you say, well, yeah, I understand, but you remember that last project, how well it went? This is part of the reason, and maybe you can help us make that an official tool. And then, retrospectives. Retrospectives. All right, so one of the things about that is most folks doing Agile will do the, what went well, what didn't go well, what can we improve, and it kind of degrades into a gripe session or, whatever, and pretty soon people are like, oh my God, I'm on 2 different teams and we waste an hour on a retrospect. That's 2 hours out of my week, blah, blah, blah. Well, first, you shouldn't be going to 2 retrospectives, but that's time for another, that's for another talk. So as you're trying to get some of this Agile stuff in there, or maybe, maybe the thing you're trying to do is say, hey, we should have retrospectives, and people roll their eyes. So there's this thing called RetroMat that has all kinds of ideas for how to start a retrospective. And now I'm saying retrospective here, I'm kind of breaking my own rule. The idea here is not to use the word retrospective, but to say, hey, let's get together and let's just talk about what's going on here. Maybe you could say the first round's on me, right? Or, maybe your team likes beer, maybe they like wine, or maybe, they want to go out for dessert or, lunch or something. Just, hey, let's talk about what's been going on over the last 2 weeks. And, what could we do? Because it's really been bothering me. And, you guys are smart. Maybe you get some ideas. I know I got some ideas. So RetroMat can help you structure that. How do you get the conversation started? How do you get some ideas? How do you sort through the ideas? How do you end that discussion in a way that is action-oriented, where people are enthused and they want to make changes, right? And so whether you call it a retrospective or not, you start getting people doing these things, making changes, feeling like they're a team and getting some camaraderie going. People will start to think, oh, hey, you came up with that morning coffee. You're getting us together to sort of, I don't know, what do you call it, team building or whatever it is, but it's been really cool. What else you got, right? So finding ways to promote interaction and feedback, that's the important high-level idea here when you're trying to go Agile. And again, I've been talking about what you can do as a person that is, not an official Agile catalyst, but all these things apply to coaches, right? These are the things that I try to do when I'm influencing folks. So, speaking of influencing, how do you influence change? Right? How many people really wake up in the morning and say, I cannot wait to make a change in my life that may personally turn out, that may turn out badly for me personally, right? So, as a catalyst, you're trying to influence change. You're not trying to change people. You're just trying to influence change. That's a subtle difference, right? So on the left, we've got a bunch of folks, and they want to make changes, but they have different ideas. They're not sure exactly. They're kind of, right? So this is it may not happen quite as clearly as this. People get together in a room, and they're just staring around. I don't mean that. But, say, hey, we should make a change. And they're all like, yeah, we should make a change. So your job as the catalyst is to figure out, what does this team really want to do? What can they do? Give them some ideas maybe to structure that so you end up, building a house for folks that maybe can't afford a giant house, whatever it is they're doing on the right. Who knows? Maybe they're making their team room. And the next thing to realize, and this is something that I've seen Agile coaches struggle with, and that's their job. I struggle with this. When you're passionate about something, it generally means that you have put some time into it, whether it's research, reading book, doing it yourself, or maybe you're naturally inclined. Maybe you're just naturally Agile. You're like, why wouldn't you break things down into small pieces? Why wouldn't you do continuous delivery? I mean, it's so obvious. Well, the thing to remember is that if you're passionate about something or particularly talented in an area, things that are obvious to you are probably obvious because of your passion, experience, and natural inclination or talent in that area. So you walk into a new team and you're like, oh my God, this place is an abandoned house that hasn't been maintained in years. They haven't had a retrospective. They haven't changed what they're doing. Can't they see this place is decrepit? And so you go in and you say, all right, I've scheduled a retrospective for us. Let's go. Yeah, you got that deadline, but we need to spend that hour. It's not going to go over too well. The first thing they say is, what do you mean this house is abandoned? What do you mean we're decrepit? What are you saying? Are you saying we're terrible? Right. So while that's what you might see as the change agent, think of it as you've got a superpower. You've got supervision, because what they may see is this. So if you talk about that beautiful house as though it's the house on the left, you're likely to get punched, right? So don't do that. So going back to the beginning of, seeking to understand first, try to figure out what it is that the folks around you, like if you want to go from Scrum to Kanban and you see that it's obvious, why don't they see it as obvious? Because those are the things that you're going to have to try to figure out to influence change. And if they don't see a problem, then from their perspective, there's no problem. If they don't see an opportunity for improvement, then from their perspective, there's no opportunity for improvement. So this is something that's really hard when you're trying to influence change, but I got to tell you, it's one of the most important things to do is to try to figure out how other people see the situation first. So related to this is something that I like to call the butterfly effect. Obviously, that's not me. I didn't invent this idea. And it was originally sort of trying to explain how small changes affect weather and why the weather is so hard to explain. And perhaps today this is even more related. So the way I like to think of it, though, is the part about small change, a small effect can have a big impact. So if you're the person with a passion to make change, whether it's going Agile, introducing Kanban, continuous delivery, or whatever it is, getting retrospectives back, you're just one person. You're just one person. And if you're trying to influence, 10 teams, right? So maybe you got 10 teams and they're all doing scaled Agile or something, but they just aren't doing the retrospectives. And you're like, wow, I see this as falling apart. What is the small thing that you can do to have the big effect? So I'm going to introduce you to a way of sort of structuring this. It's called
Damon?
Yeah.
So we have a question from the audience. You talked about catalysts in the last couple of slides. Can the Agile teams themselves influence rearrangement of items in the product roadmap? Is that possible? Or is the product roadmap is something that comes to them that they have to knock it off, in terms of...
Yeah. Those are the, putting my coaching hat on here, those are two of the possibilities. I say that and sometimes people are frustrated, like, oh, well, why don't you tell us what the right answer is? Well, there's generally no right answer. You've got all different organizations do things different ways. The hope of Agile is that as a team or organization, as somebody producing value, you want to figure out how can this organization or team produce the most value for the customer, right? So if as an organization you're expecting to, on some product you're expecting to bring in $1 million every year, and the suggestion is that adding these features will do it, it isn't so much that those are the features that you have to do to get the $1 million. That's a guess, right? So if as an organization you figure out that incorporating things from the product team actually helps you meet that goal of $1 million, and it means changing one of those items, awesome. I think described that way, you'd have to agree, well, that does sound really good, but in the real world, there's politics and, deadlines and customer promises and all that kind of stuff that you have to work with. So I would say work towards having everybody have a way to influence that, because you never know where innovation or good ideas are going to come from, but understand that you might not be able to affect change. And that's where, this idea of influencing is very powerful. So say, hey, we have this idea. So I'll give you an example. So I was working with one team, and I'm not taking I'm not saying that this was, my cool idea. It wasn't, but just one of the best examples I've seen. This team had a registration process in their product that took months, right? So you had to fill out these forms, fax stuff in. And so the CEO said, hey, let's try to get this down to, the registration down to something like 8 minutes. And that hadn't been communicated to the team. But when it actually got communicated to the team, they said, oh, you want to focus on getting that registration time, that whole process down to a shorter period of time, like really quick, because that'll get us more customers. And and they're like, yeah. They said, oh, we've been thinking about this. We think we can get it down to 8 seconds. And so, how do you say no to that? Right? So it's all about, the situation and the approach that you take.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So
thank you.
Sure. So the butterfly effect, that's the way that I like to describe something called Adkar when it is applied to teams. So I didn't invent Adkar. You can look it up. It's a whole thing. And you may have heard of other change, processes. Adkar is for influencing individuals. And as an individual, especially if you don't have a mandate, you're not part of some sort of change team, most likely you're going to be working with other individuals. So Adkar is really powerful. It's a very simple idea. So on the top we have, so it's awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement. So the basic idea is that people aren't going to make a change if they aren't aware that there's a need to. And even if they're aware that there need to, like the fireman on the left, he's thinking, burn, baby, burn. The one on the right is like, maybe we should put that out, right? So they're both aware. One has a desire, let's say, to put it out, and the other one doesn't. Hopefully all firemen have a desire to put out fires, but, just a silly example. So then that kid is really excited, right? Whatever it is you're suggesting, they're like, yes, I'm so on board. And then, there's the idea of knowledge, right? So I'm aware that there's something that needs to be done or could be done. I really want to do it. I don't know how to do it, right? So maybe somebody knows, they don't know. And then the ability, right? So maybe they have the knowledge, like, so somebody has the knowledge of how to do continuous development, continuous deployment, but they don't have a release engineering background or whatever. They don't really have that experience. That's not their forte, whatever. But let's say on the good side, there's something that, an individual wants to do, they have the desire to do, they have the knowledge to do, they have the ability to do. Reinforcement is kind of a funny word here in Adkar. I like to think of it as support, right? So the cheerleaders here at the top, they got a lot of support. They got folks that are like, you know what, you flip up into the air, take that risk, we're going to catch you, no problem. We're there for you. So you want to go to continuous, let's say you want to go to Kanban, something simpler, but you've got an executive that keeps coming in and says, take those card walls off the wall. The walls are not for that, right? So you don't have the support. So it doesn't matter that you have the awareness, desire, knowledge, and ability. There's no reinforcement that this is a good thing. Right, so just like Wile E. Coyote, he just sort of goes out in the middle of nowhere, no support, boom. Don't have that be you. So how can you use this? So whenever you're considering a change, don't think of it from your perspective. Think, for instance, if you're working with a team and you want them to, you think throughput is too slow or whatever, and you think Kanban's the right thing, go to them and see what changes they think would be useful, what problems they see, what are they aware of? Because if it's not in the awareness column, there's no point in going any further. Figure out what they're aware of. So they're aware that there's a problem. They're aware that their deliveries are slow. Is there a desire to change? We're still going to get paid, so don't care. All right, so they not a lot of desire there. So now you're going to have to work on desire. There's no point doing the rest until you can figure out what they have desire for, or build some desire. Say, well, if we do this, I don't know if you know about this, but part of our bonus is actually influenced by, do we deliver things on a regular basis? Oh, really? Okay, now I'm interested. Right, so that's the basic idea of Adkar. So the way that you can use this when you're trying to influence a team is survey people. Just find out what they're aware of and what they have a desire to try. Look for some high degree of overlap between those folks. And so they may all say, hey, you know what? I've always wanted to use a card wall. And you're willing to go to Office Depot and get the stuff and put it up for us? If you do that, we'll use it, right? So you did a pinky push there, right? So that's the butterfly effect. Find something that people already want to do the small thing that enables them to do it. Great, right? Everybody wins. So look for things with a high degree of overlap on awareness and desire. Next thing, high levels of knowledge and ability are nice to have, because likely for any change, you're going to have to do some work with increasing knowledge and ability, right? Maybe some practice, or go see how other people are doing it, try some small thing, get some experience, move on to the next thing. And the last thing is you need that support. So if you've rallied the team of a manager, or a couple managers, if there's multiple ones for this team because of different departments, whatever, say, hey, guess what? If you give me the permission to go to Office Depot and spend 20 bucks, we're going to do this card wall thing. We're really excited, and we believe that this will help us with our deliveries. But we need you to have a talk with that executive that doesn't like things on the wall, or find some place where they don't walk by. Give us a conference room where we can put it up where they don't see it or whatever. So work with that person, get them excited. So it's not like, hey, we got this crazy idea. It's like, hey, everybody's on board. I'm giving you something that's going to make your life better. I just need to know that you're going to support it, right? So then you've covered Adkar from left to right there. The other thing here is that, like I said, you're just one person, right? So one butterfly versus many butterflies. So try to figure out who else in the organization really wants to make this change. Who else is thinking that maybe Kanban is a good idea? Who else is maybe thinking that Scaled Agile is the next step? Who else is thinking continuous delivery? Figure that out. Maybe you're thinking Scaled Agile, they're thinking Kanban. Doesn't matter. You say, you know what? I'll help you with SAFe now. You help me with Kanban next, or whatever it is. Try to get that group together that helps each other make that change. Make some change, even if it's not the change you want to make. So some different ways that you can do this, which is kind of, two birds with one stone. Go to and invite people to local Agile meetups. People continuously say that they don't want to go, and learn new Agile techniques. Well, they're not going to be part of your community. But people that say, oh, I've always wanted to go, yeah, let's go, right? That person probably is going to, work with you. Create a book club. Maybe that sounds a little geeky, but it's a lot easier if you have a number of people that want to learn something. You decide on a book, you do a couple chapters, you get together, you get that regular rhythm of getting together. Then that sort of is like, oh, I better do my reading. You talk to people, you get ideas. So it's not, you just bouncing ideas off. You read a book and then it's just you, right? So if you're talking to other people, that can help. Oh, yeah, I hadn't thought about that. So you can figure out, who wants to participate with you in that. Those are going to be the people that are your allies. Another idea is organizing lunch and learns. If you're really passionate about it and you can't get support for, the company ordering pizza or whatever, hey, what's it to you to spend 30 bucks to get people excited and see who shows up, right? And maybe you can get reimbursed later. Who knows? But if you really believe in it, why not try that? And again, maybe you go to your manager and you say, hey, I'm thinking about doing this, and I'm really excited about it. If you let me, get some pizza, then I'm going to help us move in that direction. Sure, okay, I'll do that. Right, so all of these things help to build an Agile community of practice, to get the idea out there that there's some excitement, for leadership to understand, wow, we're not going to have to force this thing. People are already excited about it. If I add my support to this, it'll go even further. Right, so that's great. All right, so we've come basically to the end here, and so each of these bullet points could be their own slide, but just some additional tactics that I've used in the past that I thought were sort of high value things to quickly go over. And you may look at these things and be like, oh, hey, that reminds me. That's the whole idea here. So I was working with one large financial organization, and they had this one group that was they weren't doing Agile. They were doing traditional, sort of waterfall. They were doing it pretty well, but they were doing it in 9 months. And somebody had the bright idea of doing three-month waterfalls. Now you might think, oh, well, all the overhead and all that, they're going to be able to get less done. And that's true. They actually produced less, fewer features. But what they got, and part of the value of Agile is it's really not about just efficiency. It's about producing the most value over a given period of time. So what they found was that by doing it in 3-month chunks, they were figuring out whether or not they could actually deliver. So they tried for 3 months, and maybe it took 4 months. No big deal, right? So now they know that other stuff would have taken much longer, and they can set expectations. They got customer feedback, and then they realized, oh, hey, what we were planning to do for the next 3 months, we should change that, because people actually don't, they didn't care about the stuff we thought they'd care about, right? So breaking stuff down whether it's the whole release or its epics or its user stories, helps you to advocate for the best things and for people to see that focusing on value actually does have a good outcome. And these things don't happen overnight. I have, one organization I worked with, I said, when was the last time you changed course in the middle of a project? And they said twice. Well, after an hour of hemming and hawing and thinking, they came up with 2 examples. So, for that organization, it was tough. Create something called a working agreement. You can look that up if you haven't heard of that, but an Agile working agreement basically is, for me and the folks I work with, this is what we agree we're going to do. We agree, for instance, that we're going to get together in the morning at 9:15 for 15 minutes. We agree that we're going to use Retromat. We agree that we're going to do TDD. We agree that while there is no automated testing, we as a team are going to manually test the stuff that we do every sprint. Just write it down. And then when you have a retrospective or you get together to, casually talk about what we could change, you have written down what you did. So now when you're talking about what went well or didn't go well, you have something that you can refer to change and say, hey, we said we were going to get together every morning, but we didn't. And I think that's what we need to really focus on here. If you're, going back to the earlier question, if you're given a big chunk of stuff to do and it's not ordered, if you have to do all that work and you're just going to come up with an order based on the technology, why not do it based on value? Why not do it based on value? Because if it turns out you can't do everything there and you get to the end of the time and you're like, well, we can only do half. And people say, well, what can we salvage? And you go, I really don't know. Nothing works. I mean, we did the framework, we did the database, blah, blah, blah. We don't actually have anything working. Wouldn't it have been better to use that time to produce things of value? So you say, hey, we did half of it, but we did what seemed to us to be the most valuable stuff. And you show it to somebody and they go, oh, that really, that was pretty good. Maybe we should order things in priority. Pair up with somebody else. So if you're a QA person, go find, go talk to that developer that you keep interacting with and say, hey, I'm thinking about this. Or go talk to the UX person and say, hey, I'm thinking about this. Do a demo on a regular basis. Say, hey, I know you don't want to see this till the end, but we got this really cool thing we'd like some feedback on. Right? So when people get used to that idea on the product side of, oh, I don't have to wait to the end for feedback. I love giving feedback. So that doesn't mean, okay, now you're going to change your mind all the time. You still have to structure it. All right, so I'm going to stop there because we're getting low on time and see if there are any other questions.
Very good. Thanks, Damon, for the nice presentation. I want to go over a few slides of SynerZip.
Sure. Sorry about that. Yeah.
I want to encourage our audience to type in questions. We'll be able to take up a question or two at the end. We're almost up against our time, but we'll be able to follow up any other questions that you may enter or type in by email or other means. So with that, I want to give a brief introduction of SynerZip, high-level overview. Can you please move to the next slide, Damon? Thank you. So we are a trusted outsourcing partner for agile software product development. At SynerZip, we focus on software product development. We help companies accelerate the product delivery by hitting the roadmap items. We address technology skill gaps, and with the offshore software development, there is at least 50% cost savings that the customers will benefit from. And we also augment your on-site team with dedicated software professionals in the particular areas of your interest. So this is a high-level overview of SynerZip. Next slide, please, Damon. Okay, so this is a representative list of customers or logos of customers in the last 12 plus, 13 plus years of SynerZip. So we have worked with some top brand names and logos, helping add value to their product development. So this is just a short list of representative clients. Next one, please. All right, and here are the means to connect with SynerZip on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. So that you can find. And coming up with the next webinar. Next slide, please, Damon. Yeah, next webinar is going to be from Vinayak Joglekar, CTO and co-founder of Synergip, on the continuous delivery pipeline to build an engaging user experience. This is going to be a little earlier time, at 8 a.m. Pacific time. We are going to have this webinar, and this is going to be an exciting insight into continuous delivery pipeline. So with that, we have time to take a question or two. One question, Damon, that audience typed in is if the Agile transformation comes from the management as a directive, will that work?
Well, I've seen it work. I mean, most of my Agile coaching career has been, a hired-on coach or group of coaches at an organization. So that was sort of, part of a mandate, if you will. So I think there was a lot of success there. The desire to go Agile it can come from anywhere. One of the things that comes from a mandate, hopefully, right? So it depends on what kind of mandate it is. If it's a mandate, like Casual Friday, right? So it doesn't cost the organization anything for people to wear jeans, right? So that's not necessarily providing any resources. So the important thing that can come from a company mandating is not so much sort of the downside of mandate, thou must, but rather I would like you to, and here are some resources, right? So that's the most important thing that an organization can do, is to provide that support for the folks that want to go. Because, if the people in an organization don't want to go, they're not gonna. And they may make it look like they're going, but if they don't want to, they're not gonna.
Very good. Thanks, Damon. And thanks, audience, for joining this webinar. And I want to thank Damon Poole for his wonderful insights into Agile Transformation.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks.